Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Hi.
And today is another installment of your favorite series and mine, Project Melway, brought to you by...
I've heard of Project Melway. It's brought to you by the Gibsonian Institute.
Indeed, indeed. Phil, what are we talking about today?
Oh my gosh. We have now landed squarely, like with both feet, into my childhood. and not like my young childhood, but I should say my adolescence. And we are the magic is back. We are now in Lethal Weapon 2 zone. Lethal Weapon 2. There is not a Mel Gibson movie I have seen more in my life. I have seen this more times than any of the other movies in his filmography. There is not a movie that has probably defined action movie for me in my head more distinctly, other than Die Hard and T2. Those would be the three.
Nice.
That Lethal Weapon 2. We're here. It's one of the few sequels that I think is equal to the task of being a sequel. Well, never mind. I'm sorry. I did not mean to rhyme. I'm not interested in any of that. That was an accident. I'm not a fan of that rhyming. I don't support my own decision to do that at all.
No one supports rhyming.
No. No.
Yes. I have a confession to make. I love Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah.
That's not my confession. That wouldn't be really...
I was going to say, that's... Well done, you.
Also sunshine and romantic evenings.
Right. Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Right.
Listen, I haven't told a lot of people this, but I really like being a millionaire.
Right. Puppies. Not opposed to them. My confession. For the first time, it kind of suffered when put up against Lethal Weapon for me.
Agreed with you 100%.
Yeah,
I was unhappy to find that to be the case.
Yes. Those of you out there in Second Breakfast Nation who have not liked us on Facebook, what are you doing with your lives? But we have after the Lethal Weapon episode of Melway hit, we had, shall we say, a discussion with a very good friend of the podcast. And,
I didn't even... Oh.
And he it's okay. He made the point that it seemed a little quippy to him. And it didn't. And the first one I do not believe is quippy, and I told him as much. I happen to think he's completely
How many different
wrong
ways
about
can you
that.
tell someone they're wrong?
Right.
It's not even an argument anymore. It's
right.
Just you're wrong.
The first half of this movie, first 40, 45 minutes of this movie, felt a little quippy.
Yeah.
It felt a little quippy to me. And I'm not saying, because it wasn't
it really goes into not full-on comedy, which I would say Lethal Weapon 3 and Lethal Weapon 4 is a comedy.
Yes, agreed.
Not a good one.
No, also agreed.
Lethal Weapon 3 is each movie gets progressively lighter and progressively more focused on the comedy, which becomes more and more problematic each episode of Lethal Weapon because each episode gets because the violence stays the same.
Right.
If anything, the violence escalates.
Agreed.
No, I don't think the violence escalates in Lethal Weapon 2, though. I think one of the things that's interesting is generally in a sequel, the body counts jump. The body count jumps, whether that be Jaws 2 or Die Hard 2. John McClane kills like in the first one, John McClane kills like 5 people. Yeah, it's like some very small number, and in the second one, he kills like 47 people.
It's true. That's true.
And Jaws is similar to that. And Scream. If you watch, the great thing about watching Scream 2 is Jamie Kennedy actually
says that
these are the rules of the horror movie sequel. But a lot of action sequels follow the same line.
Agreed.
And Lethal Weapon 2 in this sense doesn't. It's interesting. It still doesn't follow a lot of the conventions of sequels. And to that degree, I think it is successful. But I do think they have the main darkness of Lethal Weapon is this specter of the idea that Mel Gibson's character, Martin Riggs, is suicidal. And the movie is dealing with the fact that he's suicidal. And he's been rescued from that. This is what's funny is it's actually character development in some way. Because now these two guys who in the first movie come to respect each other, by the beginning of the second movie, just straight up like each other.
Yeah.
And really enjoy each other. And Mel Gibson's character, Riggs, is at this point now not interested in killing himself.
Right.
He's got some sadness, which I think, again, one of the best scenes in the movie. But with him and Danny Glover is named Murtaugh, with him and Murtaugh's wife in the kitchen.
Yes.
Talking about his deceased wife.
Yep.
But overall, it's just a lighter toned movie in that sense.
I have a question for you. This popped into my head, and I have ideas, but I'd love to hear yours. To what extent do you think sequels, and this is, no one would argue this is anything other than a sequel, I would venture to say very few people have seen Lethal, certainly who were around to see it in the theaters and were of age when both movies came out. Very few people saw Lethal Weapon 2 that did not see Lethal Weapon 1.
Right.
How much character development is incumbent on the sequel? How much do you need? Because here's what I felt. I'm still not sure what your question means. Well, let me tell you what I think, and
Okay.
then you give me a response.
Okay.
I missed character development, and it isn't like. Obviously, I always want there to be more character development. Like in every kind of movie, I always want there to be more character because that's what I respond to as a movie watcher. But the fact that there was character development in the first Lethal Weapon, I won't lie, some of that does carry over. I don't want to be told the entire story of their relationship and their history before they met each other every single time I see these characters in a new movie on screen.
Sure.
But I think there has to be a balance. And frankly, this movie, at least in the beginning, did not strike that balance.
Oh, I don't think it in any way highlights their past.
Right.
I think what it does is, from the beginning, shows you their chemistry. And shows you, because it starts with a car chase.
Yes.
And whereas the first one starts with really, really somber music and a very, very sort of cryptic and suggestive. Oh, pardon me. Cut the vapors. A very cryptic and it's early, folks. It's very early in the morning. A cryptic and suggestive suicide scene in the first one, or murder scene. I think it's a suicide scene. The second one starts with the Warner Brothers theme music. And then goes into a car chase where they're like screaming at each other, but like in a very comical way.
Yes.
Which I think it's a really well done action sequence, as I consider all of the action sequences from Lethal Weapon 2. It is a series of really wonderful, in my mind, it is a series of really good bits or scenes.
I agree,
and I really like all of them. But I don't think. I think if you came in cold on Lethal Weapon 2, you wouldn't realize just. It's like almost like just having watched Lethal Weapon 1, you go, man, Riggs. It's almost like nice to see Riggs not about to put a bullet in his head.
Yes, that's true.
But if you hadn't seen Lethal Weapon 1, you would have just thought he was just this goofball.
Yes, agreed. Can I tell you where the movie turned around for me? Which is interesting because I think my big problem with it is that it is sort of quippy without earning it.
Yeah.
But it hits a point about 40, 45 minutes in, I think. I'm not somewhere around there. And then from then on, I think the quips are still there, but I feel like it earns them, and it is as good as Lethal Weapon 1, which is good because when the good half is the second half, you go out of the theater remembering the
end of this movie does not disappoint.
Zero.
It's just
it disappoints zero. It's amazing.
So where does it start for you?
The toilet scene
is one of the greatest scenes of my lifetime. For me, when I think of Lethal Weapon, that is the first two scenes I think of are probably, when I think of the Lethal Weapon series, the first two scenes I think of are from that movie. Are from Lethal Weapon 2, and that is the first scene, and that is the moment when their relationship just go ahead.
I do want to hear what you have to say, but what I find so interesting about, or what I found so interesting about that scene this time that I watched it, was that in a movie that was quippy in the bad way, And then you have for those who have not seen the movie, Danny Glover, Roger Murtaugh he's going after these drug dealers who are South African diplomats, so they can't be touched because of diplomatic immunity. And they are retaliating, and there's a point in the movie where they basically kill like half of the LA police force. But but Murtaugh is in charge of the investigation. So what they do is they rig his toilet to explode when it's not clear if it's when he flushes or when he stands up. But, oh no, it has to be when he stands up. It has to be when he stands up because it's a pressure thing.
Right.
And he calls Riggs over, and Riggs is like, I will handle this with the utmost discretion, but we got to call the bomb squad. And then, of course, like, you got the news choppers. You got like
75 cars outside the window.
Right. But what I find interesting is in a movie that was quippy in the bad way, that was ripe for stupid, literal toilet humor. And while there is some humor in it, it is this sort of like melancholy, we are friends, and how did we get into this mess, and I love you, man, kind of
Which of course they never say I love you, but is that it's that. In fact, they get to that point where he's like, he looks at him. It's a great moment when he's like, Riggs, and he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, man, yeah. He's just like, yeah, me too.
And it is understated in the way the first half of the movie is not. It is character driven in the way the first half of the movie is not. It's understated
as a bomb scene on a toilet can be, I think.
It's true. And it ends with the explosion of a toilet.
I think it works really well. I think I think the whole series, including the bad movies, all hinges, and its greatest strength to me, unquestionably, is the chemistry between Riggs and Murtaugh. The chemistry between Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. It's funny, you talk about in the first movie, really, that Danny Glover's performance anchors the movie because he's sane and Mel Gibson isn't.
Yep.
By the second one, it isn't Danny Glover that anchors it. It really is them as a unit. They as a unit anchor that movie. And I'm fascinated. So that I love, and I love that that sequence is, again, like, that is to me just I don't know if it's plausible. I don't know. Like, I have no idea. Plausibility, like, there's a lot of things in this movie that strain credulity, but as far as that, but it's an action movie, and as far as action movies go, like old school action movies with stunts instead of graphics.
Yes.
Right. It is just it's so special to me. It's really, really special to me.
I want to talk about the South Africans.
Yes,
because they are the best villains that I've ever, I think, might be in any. No, because Hans Gruber reigned supreme. But I don't know if it was my first experience with the accents. What'd you say?
It's close to me.
It is close.
Yeah, their accent's funny. The first time you hear them, you're like, why are those British people talking like that?
It's true. Joss Ackland is so scary as a guy who never really gets his hands dirty until the very, very end.
Yeah.
And his lieutenant, who is played by an actor I do not know, is just straight up terrifying.
Who Martin Riggs just calls Adolf because he has the Adolf Hitler side swipe hairdo.
It's true.
He's a really I'm surprised we never saw that guy again.
Me too.
Because he's a really good bad guy. If I saw him walking down the street today, well, I saw the movie yesterday, but had I not seen the movie yesterday, if I saw that guy walking down the street today, I would have known him. He is etched in my memory.
Yes, agreed. And it's a good the plot that they have, like, we're going to smuggle billions of dollars of drugs and like move it around and launder this money, and you can't touch me because of a loophole in the law. That triggers all of our like, oh, we want someone to take justice.
And they're foreigners, but it goes further than that, right? And this is something that the Lethal Weapon series, Lethal Weapon 2, I think is. It's not the most explicit. Lethal Weapon 2, they make an explicit decision that they didn't make in Lethal Weapon 1. And then Lethal Weapon 3 and 4 do it as well.
Yep.
And that explicit decision is to be a socially conscious action film.
I'm really glad that you brought this up. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say this about Lethal Weapon 1. Lethal Weapon 1 doesn't do it explicitly, but I would like someone smarter than me, and maybe we're looking too deep. The problem is someone smarter than us would never do the stupid things that we do. That's the problem. But Lethal Weapon 1, every single major character is what? Do you remember?
I.
A Vietnam vet.
Oh yes, yes.
And so it would be really interesting to think of this movie in terms of a critique of Vietnam and the different ways that it left people broken.
Right.
That would be an interesting thing. I don't know if you could. I don't know if it deserves that. I don't know if it merits that.
Fair point.
Even in the first one, when you watch the movie and you've got this family, a big element of the Lethal Weapon series, and I want to talk about motifs in a little bit. We're not talking about motifs now, but we are going to talk about motifs in a little bit.
Sure.
One of the motifs that's really strong throughout is the centerpiece ends up being, in many ways, not just Briggs and Murtaugh's of this, but Murtaugh's family.
Yes.
In fact, our critic of the film, our friend who didn't, your friend, I'm not going to call him a friend, your friend who didn't like the first one because of the lack of soul that he has, made a comment about, like, there's a scene in the first one when all the family walks in and brings him his Murtaugh his birthday cake while he's in the bath. Well, he's in the bath. What kind of family does that? And I was like, a really close family. Like, I don't know how to answer that to you. Like, you either buy into the way this family is or you don't. And they're ridiculous. But the second one, when he's on the toilet, he says it's the first time I've been able to sit on the toilet in peace for 8 years. And I just can't wait till this guy has kids. That's all I have to say about that.
Right.
Because last night I was trying to go to the bathroom and my daughter wouldn't let me leave the door closed. And I've always been like, I'm like that guy who like brags. When I go to the bathroom, I close the door, I lock the door, like no one's bothering me. That's Phil's time. I'm like that. I'm very protective. It's silly. I'm protective about silly things.
I wouldn't call that silly.
Last night my daughter was literally trying to jiggle the doorknob and going, "Daddy," and started crying. So I was like, I guess now when I go to the bathroom, you're in here. Great. Like, awesome. So I get that whole thing so really well. But my point is, even in the first episode, that was a way big digression, but we're going to keep going.
Awesome.
On the fridge, there was a sign on the fridge in their house in the first one that said "End Apartheid." So they just had these little moments like that are like, by the way, this is a real politically or socially conscious, I should say.
They have the
black family.
Yes, they have the discussion, which seemed weird in the moment to me, but not when you talk.
Daddy
can't eat tuna. Only albacore.
Right, and then that's, I think they really decided in the second one. They did that in the second one, and then the second one really is about South Africa.
Yes.
And really, it's great because it's a polemic. It's South Africans. The South African government is evil.
Yes.
And so they were like, and they played on our American sort of movie-going interest by being like no one in America cared about apartheid because we're not good people. Our lives are good, so what's the issue? Right. And so they were like, you don't care about apartheid, but they're coming to America and running drugs and killing cops. Let's go end apartheid. Let's stop South Africa now. Like it's beautiful. They were like, how do we condescend to American levels? I have an idea.
Fair.
And then we'll talk about this. So we will talk in the third and fourth one about what the social issues they address are, and we don't need to talk about them in this movie. But note that from this point forward, not only does Lethal Weapon series decide to be equal parts or comedy and action, but it also decides to be about a social issue in each episode.
I agree with that. I think that's really interesting. I think it's well said. I do love the like the idea that like apartheid ended because and it didn't. I'm not saying that.
It's also wait, hold on. I'm going to put
funny.
it myself. It's also a particularly American idea.
Indeed.
That everything ends or begins when America wants it to end or begin.
It doesn't, right?
I believe. No, I mean I think probably that it does. So.
Interestingly, I recall that we have at least one viewer in South Africa.
Really?
We do.
I have had several friends from South Africa and coworkers, actually, mostly all coworkers. And their accent, do you know how they say my name, Phil? Do you know how they say it with their accent?
How do they say it?
Full.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hey, Full.
Awesome. I like
so
that.
Whatever. And I have zero, by the way, for the record, I have no one way or the other feeling about South Africa or South Africans. It's a place. I have no, but the movie is centered on the idea that the South African government in the time of apartheid is evil.
Sure. Not a huge fan of vuvuzelas from the last World Cup. Not a big fan of those.
I don't who?
The trumpets that they used with the bzzz during the soccer games, I was not a fan of that.
Can I, it's confession time.
Yeah.
I love vuvuzelas.
I don't know who you are. I don't know.
I'm a guy who on my old phone got a vuvuzela app and would just hit it and go like this and stand in front of people for no reason.
You're the worst person I have ever met.
I am. I like things that are obnoxious for their own sake. I admit that.
Speaking of things that are obnoxious for their own sake, let's talk about Joe Pesci.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What? Speaking of things that are obnoxious for their own sake, let's talk about Joe Pesci in this movie.
Yes, Joe Pesci's character is, it's fantastic. It's pre My Cousin Vinny, by the way.
That's true. It's
actually pre Goodfellas.
He turns around and does Goodfellas right after this movie. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
When you think about Pesci in the late '80s, early '90s, when you think about Lethal Weapon 2. He goes Lethal Weapon 2, Goodfellas, My Cousin Vinny, and then he was like a star. He was like in movies.
Home Alone was right around then too.
Oh my God, Home Alone was '89.
Yeah.
Home Alone was '89 or no?
Or
was
90.
It '89?
I don't. It was between '89 and '91.
I'm looking this up as we speak.
Please do. Please do. He is infuriating.
1990.
No, he is infuriating in this movie. He is annoying. He is a caricature, and yet it somehow works. It somehow works for me.
Totally.
There is a scene towards the end where he says goodbye to them, and he hugs them both, and it is played for laughs, but it is not purely played for laughs. And
no, not at all. And he's definitely human. He becomes a caricature later on, but in Lethal Weapon 2, he strikes that balance. So in '89, he was in Lethal Weapon 2. Then in 1990, he was in the great movie Betsy's. Did you hear that?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
you will.
yes.
Yeah. Betsy's Wedding, which whatever. Molly Ringwald getting married and Alan Alda's the dad. Just a great movie to never see if you don't have to, but it's on video probably somewhere. It's on a videotape somewhere. So anyway, Lethal Weapon 2, Goodfellas, Home Alone. Then he had a starring role in The Super, which was terrible. Then JFK, My Cousin Vinny, Lethal Weapon 3. It was just like
over and over again. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
You know, the 90s, and then in the mid 90s, he was in Bronx Tale, With Honors, and Casino. I mean, he really.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't even see Goodfellas then. Like I didn't see it when it came out. But
you know, he retired, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's made one movie since 2006, and it was in 2010, and no one saw it.
Well, I miss him.
Yeah,
and frankly, Lethal Weapon 2 is an example of why.
But you know that he became famous. He was a child star in the 50s, so he's been in show business since he was like 12.
I did not know that, and I am astonished. I am actually wearing my shocked face right now. That is actually happening. I can't believe that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. What did he do in the 50s? What did he do? Was he in movies, TV?
Star Time. He was on a TV show called Star Time Kids.
Awesome.
And he was a child actor and a singer, and awesome. He made a record in the 60s, which meant he was like 20, under the stage name Joe Ritchie.
Okay.
And he played the guitar with several bands. He played the guitar with the Starlighters. So anyways, he was a showman. He was an old school showman.
Awesome. I love that.
Which is funny that his sort of, to our generation, clearly, even I mean, Home Alone is one thing, but even in Home Alone, it shouldn't have felt because it came beforehand. But I think it felt like he was playing off of that Goodfellas thing. But I mean, he was in Raging Bull.
I think all of that is sort of playing off of, not to say that Goodfellas is playing off of it, but
Home Alone came out right after Goodfellas, so in our minds.
Well, right, but it's all sort of playing off of that Raging Bull sort of. Not that. But
Raging Bull is just like a normal guy. I mean, he has.
I guess, but he's still Joe Pesci. You know, I mean, and maybe this is a function of the fact that I saw Raging Bull last of all of these movies that we've talked about, except for Goodfellas.
Yeah.
So tell me about that's just for me.
So tell me about Joe. Let's talk about Joe Pesci's character, whose name was Leo Getz.
Leo Getz.
Whatever you want, Leo
Getz. Yes.
You get it?
He is. Okay. Okay.
His greatest line in the movie we cannot utter on the Second Breakfast podcast.
That's true.
But
That's
it's
true.
genius.
Yes, yes. Tyler and Dave, get on that.
Seriously.
So, is there a Lethal Weapon 2 video game?
Probably not.
Which makes me sad.
That would have back when that would have been considered like they wouldn't have done that because it would have been catering to children, and there would have been like Tipper Gore, and somebody else would have been angry about it. So,
he's clearly, this guy is clearly a really smart guy. He's a money launderer, and he actually gives a fairly detailed and accurate description of at least one way to launder money.
Yeah,
which is and
it was detailed enough that I didn't understand it, and not because it was incoherent, but because I was like, "That's real." I'd have to rewind this, and I'm not going to do that.
Indeed.
Because I'm probably never going to. I don't want to say definitely. Probably never going to launder.
Don't lose hope. Perhaps.
No, listen. If there is a reason for the furthering of the gospel and the betterment of a church that I can just straight up launder money, I will find a way. But other than that, it's probably not going to happen. Realistically.
Right. Well, in this partnership, you can leave the money laundering to me then.
Okay. Thank you.
Law enforcement.
You've got it all figured out.
Law enforcement. I'm not planning on it. I'm not planning on any endeavors. But I'm just saying, of the two of us, I'm probably more likely.
You're so anti-Semitic sometimes.
Oh, you are the worst. Actually, let's talk about that for a second. Joe Pesci, clearly an Italian guy, named Leo Getz, and he's a money launderer.
Italians and Jews play each other all the time.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just
Or maybe
saying.
just Italians play Jews. John Turturro has played a Jew more than Woody Allen.
Al Pacino just played Shylock a few years ago.
Yeah, Al Pacino doesn't play anything anymore.
That's
okay.
Fair. That's
Al
fair.
Pacino like phones in rage and craziness from another planet.
Fair enough. The last character that I want to talk about is Rika, who is Mel Gibson's love interest in this movie, played by Patsy Kensit.
Jeez. Patsy Kensit like inhabited my dreams for years. For this one movie.
Something I realized, Phil, and I don't think I'm manufacturing this in my memory. I think she might have been my first movie crush. She's certainly the first one that I carry with me to this day, right? Honestly, maybe it's because I saw her naked. I was,
There's a little bit of nudity, and I said to my wife last night, I'm like, hey, listen, there's some nudity coming up, and I remember it. I could draw it from memory from when I was a kid. It's not good or bad. I'm not making value judgment on that. I don't. You and I have talked in the past that as an adult, when I watch movies and they have nudity, I'm generally like, that's just unnecessary.
Right. And
this is no exception. The nudity in this movie is completely unnecessary.
Agreed.
But when I was a kid, it was more like, oh my gosh.
It's true. She is unbelievably gorgeous in this movie. And I'll be honest, even though she is British, she does a very good... I'm not South African, so I don't know, but it sounds like a good South African accent to me.
She does a better South African accent as a Brit than Mel Gibson does an American accent as an Australian.
Let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But the last thing I'll say is this. Her South African accent does not hurt. Does not hurt her allure in this movie. Also, I looked this up on IMDb as I was watching the movie. Mel Gibson, early 30s when he made this movie, 32, 33, somewhere around there.
She was 19 or something?
21, which means maybe 19 or 20 when the movie was shot.
Yeah.
That's almost uncomfortable for me now.
The rules are half your age plus 7. If the youngest you're allowed to date and not be a disgusting human being.
Is that in Article 3 of the Constitution? Is that the rule there? Is that the...
No, it's not in the Constitution, and that's how you know that it's a real rule. It's universal, deeply held. It's not up for debate. It's math. The Pythagorean theorem isn't in the Constitution either, and yet we all know it to be true. So if he was 33, you said he was 30 or 33?
I think he was 32. I think he was 32.
So he's 32. That's better. It's a even number. So 32, which means half his age is 16 plus 7 is 23. She was too young for him.
Indeed. Indeed.
But look at the two of them together. I wasn't thinking she was young.
I agree. I was actually surprised.
Might just be that I remember this movie from when I was a kid, and everybody seemed older than me.
That's true. That's true too. But even,
I saw this
last
movie
night,
when I was 10 or 11, and in my mind, everybody was older. So she was older.
Yeah, last night it didn't seem like watching the two of them together. I think that's more. I think that's interestingly because he doesn't look old in this movie. I think that's actually a function of her looking older than 21 to me. I was more surprised that she was 21 in this movie than I was surprised that he was 32.
Right.
Right. And to get away from the salacious, she does create a real character that you do care about and that you can see that Riggs cares about. And
and she's interesting and like, yeah, I mean, it's I don't want to say the romantic subplot seemed tacked on because it didn't, but it sure escalated quickly.
Indeed.
That escalated.
I don't want to say
that got out of hand fast.
This is not.
At one point, she has a trident. And, no, sorry, but this
is not When Harry Met Sally, where you were watching two people get to know each other and fall in love that way.
Right.
It's I'm really attractive and you're really attractive. Perhaps we should do it. I mean, that's
and then they do.
And then they do. And then they do.
Yeah. And he pulls off some things that if he wasn't so charming, and let me be clear, Mel Gibson is so charming in this movie.
So charming.
This is the movie for me where it really, all of Mel's powers as a movie star, not an actor necessarily. I think he's a better actor in the last 10 years than he was at this point. I think that later on, you just don't ever notice an accent ever in his performances, and here you do.
Yep.
But his charisma and his power and his magnetism and his charm all come together in Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon 2 in a way that is unparalleled. Because in Lethal Weapon 1, there's not that comedy. Lethal Weapon 2, he plays up that comic edge in a way that's completely believable and charming, and he literally charms the pants off of her, not figuratively. Literally charms the pants off of her. Yes. And you get it. Like, you get it. You're like, okay. And it's one of those things where if anybody else had done had anybody else done what he did, it would have been like a little rapey. Like, it would have been uncomfortable. I'm not saying he does anything that was wrong. It's not. She's consensual and she falls in love with him, but
the pickup happens in a public place. It's not like
he's very insistent.
That is true.
He's very insistent, and if anybody else had done it, it would have felt forceful and a little bit like, hey, buddy, I said no.
Right, but
with him, it's like, come along with me on my magic carpet ride, and you feel like she's like a whole new world. It's really charming and adorable.
Agreed.
I have a couple things that I want to talk about, you want to talk about Patsy Kensit. Literally, though, Patsy Kensit's on the strength of this one performance, I know her name.
Yep.
I know her face from memory.
Yep.
And she is in probably my the pantheon of hot female ingenues in my lifetime from this one movie.
Could not agree with you more.
And it doesn't. And by the way, if you're watching it, if you've never seen it before and you watch it now, you might be like, why? I don't know, except to say that again, you can't introduce a woman that attractive into my psyche when I'm 10 and then show her naked and then expect me not to be just like scalded, burned, branded into my memory for the rest of my life.
Right. That's not happening. That's
just, I don't know much about Freud. I really don't, actually. I don't know much about psychoanalysis.
But it does make sense.
I do know that the 10 to 15 age is an incredibly formative period. And it's a time when we're developing all sorts of ideas about what attractive and good and all that stuff is. And she snuck in right around that time, like right at the awakening of that life for me. Yes. She's glorious. She's very beautiful. Yes. And but that's not the most important thing I want to talk about. The most important thing I want to talk about is okay. Do we all know what motifs are in stories? Okay, so for people, for people at home who are culturally illiterate, don't worry. We will not judge you. I'm here to help you. I teach this when I would teach Old Testament classes. I would talk about motifs. You see recurring themes.
Mm.
And in the Old Testament, anytime a man and a woman meet at a well, they're gonna fall in love. They are going to fall in love. It's what happens when a man meets a woman at the well, it's pretty fascinating. You just get used to seeing that if a man and a woman meet at a well, they're going to fall in love in the Old Testament.
Okay.
The great motifs, and the way I always describe it is like to my kids is like if you see a prom scene in a movie. Like there's certain things that you know you're going to hit, certain moments that you're going to happen, beats. The motifs in Lethal Weapon series are now being shown. You couldn't tell what they'd be from the first one, but now in the second one, we are going to see certain recurring themes. Now, there's a question where someone would say that's just called cliches or somebody just rehashing the same old things over and over again.
Sure.
Maybe it's just that I hold Lethal Weapon, even the bad ones, in a deferential light. But I really believe that these people consciously were trying to hit these moments in a way that was not just like, well, we did it in the last one. This is how you make a successful movie. I think they were saying these are the hallmarks of this franchise. And so for instance, the socially conscious action film. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, whether it's successful at it isn't the point. The point is that they try to do it. That you see that each and it's more explicit in each Lethal Weapon movie, and with each succeeding movie, you see these socially conscious things.
Even real quick, just to jump in there, because I agree with you. A, it doesn't matter if they're successful or not, but B, even as a very young man, I don't know how many of these he wrote, but Shane Black did write both the first and the second one at least, and I believe he
wrote the story for the second one, but ended up not writing the screenplay. They rejected his screenplay because it was too dark.
A, that's fascinating. B, where you would layer in motifs would be the story rather than the individual lines.
You're right.
So
you're absolutely right.
So
I'd love to talk to Shane Black about where I looked up the guy who Jeffrey Boehm is his name, who died of a mysterious lung disease really randomly in 2000. It's very strange, but until then he wrote this. He wrote Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He wrote The Lost Boys. He was a guy that they would bring in a lot to punch up scripts.
Like a script doctor, like Carrie Fisher, Joss Whedon, people like that.
Yes, exactly. But not, and he actually co-wrote Lethal Weapon 1, helped, but was not credited. Like he did a punch up of Lethal Weapon 1, but was not credited. Okay. And so when Shane Black turned in the draft for Lethal Weapon 2, and they decided it was too dark, Riggs dies in the end of Lethal Weapon 2. For instance, in the first one, he wanted Riggs and Murtaugh to be separated, like they go off their separate ways at the end of Lethal Weapon 1. And they said, and the producer said no. And in the second one, he wanted him to die. I mean, he really was like, let's not turn this into a chain. And the studio was like, let's turn this into a chain.
Nice. But I derailed you. Right. Talking about motifs.
That's fine. So Jeffrey Boehm is an interesting guy that I looked up. I wanted to see what his deal was. So you've got the motif of the socially conscious. Each movie has a different social issue that they're dealing with. And another really big motif is the preserving / defending of Murtaugh's family. Murtaugh is the only one throughout the series that we see that has a stable family life. Yep. That he has worked really hard to maintain, and in each film, not only is his family endangered, and in an increasingly silly ways, like not silly, but I should say not like silly, implausible and extreme. Okay. Each movie ratchets up the implausibility. Okay. But not only is the family threatened, but the house is physically threatened, to the point that in Lethal Weapon 4, the house is burned down. So this is a really interesting thing they decide to do to show.
I agree with that. That is fascinating. That I had forgotten that about Lethal Weapon 4. Thank you for spoiling that for me.
It's not the end of the movie, so
fair.
There's nothing I can spoil for you about Lethal Weapon 4.
That's a totally and completely fair point. What I find interesting, and I don't know if this is a motif, although they certainly do damage to vehicles in the other movies, but the progression of this movie is like the destruction of that station wagon. It's like
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no. Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
bonus scene in Street Fighter 2 where you just kick the crap out of a car until it
Yes.
basically implodes.
Oh my gosh, I remember that was amazing.
Right?
Hey, who was your character when you played Street Fighter 2?
Chun-Li. You could jump off
Not shocking to me at all.
You could jump off the side of the screen, for crying out loud.
Oh no, she was great. She did the helicopter kick. She was
Right?
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was for a video game, let's be honest, fetching.
Yeah, agreed.
So.
Not hard on the eyes.
So anyways, the car, the destruction of the car, and just them driving in general is absolutely a continuing motif.
Yep.
As is improbable chase sequences. So for instance, in the first one, Mel Gibson runs after a car. and doesn't catch up with them. Let's not get crazy. But
right.
doesn't lose them either right away.
It's
very strange. And in the second one, I believe there's something similar to that. Well, there's an improbable chase sequence. Oh, there's the chase sequence with the cars. There's a car chase sequence with him jumping onto the truck,
yep.
which is completely. If you don't believe, this is the place where your implausibility factor is stretched, really stretched.
Indeed.
You can feel the burn a little bit.
Is that? Are you talking about the one that ends with the surfboard?
I am certainly talking about that.
Yes, agreed.
Which is indelibly marked.
No, absolutely.
This movie that's the thing is I can't speak objectively about it. I can only speak affectionately about it.
It's fair.
Even the things that, it isn't as good as I remember in the sense of it is not as good as Lethal Weapon 1. It is not as dark. It is not as accomplished. But it is successful in its own right, and it is meant so much to me that I don't pretend to speak objectively about it in any way. I speak only with love and affection for this film. That's a motif. But I'm really interested in, and of course, very simply, the development and frankly domestication of Martin Riggs.
Yeah.
And this movie really is him bringing a girl home and sleeping with her.
Mm-hmm.
But it's done in such a way that you actually see it as a progression rather than. And I have to say, like, for a movie that shows a couple, like a man and woman meeting and then him really, like, questionably bringing her home, and then them falling in love in a minute, and then I won't say what happens after that. For the escalation factor, they make it mean something. Like it's meaningful to him, and then in the fourth one, each thing has an escalating factor. There's an escalating factor with Murtaugh's oldest daughter, and how his relationship with his oldest daughter works.
Yep.
And these are all interesting things. I think this is what makes the movie why it matters. I think is because we do care about the characters.
I agree with you. I think. I
have a big question for you. But go ahead. I'm holding. Go.
Well, real quick, I would say. I agree with you about all the things. I agree with everything you just said. And I think it's really fascinating that it doesn't really work as a movie, but it still works for us. But I will say the reason I think that is because all of my problems with the movie really are in those first 40 minutes. Once it settles down, in the toilet bomb scene, which is now I've said that sentence. Now that sentence is out in the world. It is the equal of Lethal Weapon 1, with the possible exception of it's not quite as dark, but it's not significantly lighter.
But darkness isn't darkness. If Lethal Weapon 1 and Lethal Weapon 2 were playing on simultaneous televisions, I would watch Lethal Weapon 2. Like just in terms of how am I going to spend my evening, but for casual viewing.
Agreed.
It's just. We haven't even talked about. We won't talk about just in case there's a person who hasn't seen the movie, but I don't know who you are. But but the surfboard scene, not the surfboard scene. I'm sorry, the house on stilts is iconic beyond.
Yes,
agreed. It's beyond iconic. But here's the thing that sells it, right? You're so focused on how Mel Gibson plays crazy devastated so well.
It's the key to the character.
His life later on, maybe not so much playing as tapping into something that is true about him, and I don't mean that negatively, bud.
No,
don't come
totally
after me.
Fair. That's totally fair.
My love for Mel Gibson is now complete. It's when we started Project Melway, I thought it was like, oh, this is fun.
Right.
But now I'm like, just love Mel Gibson.
Likewise. I am on board. Ask your question. Let's go out on this question.
I forgot oh no. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Which which action series? I know that you like Die Hard better than Lethal Weapon 1.
Right?
Which series holds up better? Like over the duration? Like Lethal Weapon series or Die Hard series?
That is a
Because now there are 5 Die Hards,
that's
including
an even better question than you think. Can I punt that question until we watch Lethal Weapon 4?
I think we should do that, and I think maybe we should do a Die Hard marathon, and I think we should actually that should be a podcast. I think we should talk about Lethal Weapon series versus Die Hard series.
That sounds good.
Because I think I would argue that Die Hard part of the thing with Lethal Weapon series, well, we'll get into it, but I think Lethal Weapon series, even when it fails, is intentional, and it's the same crew coming through the whole thing.
That's true.
Doesn't necessarily make it a better movie or a series.
Agreed.
But it's what it has going for it.
We could literally talk about this movie forever, even with its faults. Even with its faults.
We could have called our podcast like "The Magic Is Back."
It's ooh.
I know.
Name change? No. So
how about when he goes? Come on, come on, we're back. We're bad. You're black. I'm mad.
Amazing, hilarious. Lethal Weapon 2. See it, enjoy it, watch it with someone you love and who doesn't mind gratuitous nudity.
There's only one scene.
You're right. That's true.
Compared to a lot of things in the 80s, it's not that. It's not that bad.
Agreed. So the last thing I'll say about the movie, and then we'll talk about what's coming up on Project Melway. Still more gratuitous than the nudity. It's the saxophone.
But it has been tempered a lot. The saxophone goes throughout all 4 movies. It's a character in the films. It's a character in the films.
It's a silly character in the films.
Fine. Nevertheless, it is. It's not something that if they made a Lethal Weapon 5 tomorrow, it would have saxophone.
Fair. No, that's fair.
What is added is Eric Clapton's guitar.
Okay.
Throughout, tempered by Eric Clapton playing guitar, and then the end credit sequences with the George Harrison song. So I ended on a happy, and yeah, I was.
Fair enough.
And Eric Clapton singing a Dylan song, and then George Harrison. I was a happy boy.
Fair enough. Next 3 weeks on Project Melway. Next week we've got Bird on a Wire. Should be fun.
Okay.
Air America, which I have never seen. I'm very much looking forward to it, even though I hear it's not a great movie because it's young Mel Gibson and young Robert Downey Jr. Looking forward to that. And 3 weeks from now, Hamlet, which I'm looking forward to just because it's Hamlet. Are
you ready? Are you ready for this about Hamlet?
What's that?
Franco Zeffirelli, who directed it,
yes.
cast Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
On the strength of his performance as Martin Riggs in The Lethal Weapon 1 and 2.
I love that. That is fantastic. So
that when I read that gave me hope for Hamlet.
That is exciting. Literally, I don't mean that in an ironic or funny way. I am excited by that. Yeah. So next 3 weeks, Bird on a Wire, Air America, and Hamlet. Set your cues. And that's about it. That'll do us for today. This has been another Project Melway installment of Second Breakfast. I'm Andy Roth. That's Phil Duvall. We'll see you again real soon.
Nice
Bye-bye.
working with you, Andy.